December 21st, 1988. The 259 passengers lounged in their pristine airliner. The Boeing 747, named Clipper Mate of the Seas, embarked on a seemingly routine journey from Frankfurt to Detroit, with stopovers in London and New York. Little did anyone know, a silent evil lurked within its belly. The attack was carried out on a Pan Am Boeing 747-100, the first iteration on the iconic Boeing 747. In fact, being registered as N739PA, it was one of the first of its kind. Pan Am commissioned Boeing to make this plane for the transatlantic crossings as the routes became more popular as they needed to replace the aging 707s. By 1988, the 747-100 was already an aging model, being superseded by two new revisions to the 747, and soon the widely acclaimed 747-400, which would be released later by Boeing and is still widely used today. To understand the bombing, we must start with the Cold War. For most of the latter half of the 20th century between Western capitalist and Soviet East, President Václav Havel of the former communist state of Czechoslovakia stated that a substantial amount of plastic explosive Semtex was sold through the Omnipool, a Czech military manufacturer, to the Libyan government during the 1980s. This is the same explosive that was used in the explosion of Flight 103. On December 5, 1988, 16 days before the bombing, a man called the U.S. Embassy in Helsinki, Finland, described as having an Arabic accent. He told the embassy that a Pan Am flight would be blown up in the next 2 weeks and that the plane would be leaving from Frankfurt, Germany. The bomb threat caused the FAA to send out a safety bulletin which was sent out to all American airlines, including Pan Am. A few days before the bombing, the owner of clothing store Mary's House in Salima, Malta, Tony Gauci, gets a customer who picks clothing, seemingly at random. The customer is described as an Arabic man with a Libyan accent. On December 21, 1988, the bomber, in connection with Libyan government, carried the bomb on a flight to Malta. It was then transferred on a flight to Frankfurt. Once in Frankfurt, it was checked into a feeder flight headed to Heathrow Airport on a Boeing 727. After it was in Heathrow, it was moved onto the 747 involved in the bombing, where it would then travel to the U.S. The bomb contained a chronometer, which is a timer that goes off at a specific time. The timer was thought to be the MST-13 manufactured by the Swiss company Amibo Telecommunications. It was programmed to go off roughly when the plane was over the Atlantic. As the behemoth reached an altitude of 31,000 feet over Scotland, bystanders on the ground watched in horror as an explosive inside the cargo bay detonated, tearing through the fuselage and sending the plane crashing to the ground. Twisted metal rained down over the Scottish hills, transforming a peaceful evening into a nightmarish landscape. After the incident, investigations were headed by the Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary. They were also supported by the FBI and other international agencies. Every piece of debris had the possibility of being crucial evidence to finding the perpetrators. These investigators slowly pieced together the puzzle and were motivated by a deep sense of obligation to the victims and their families. Of such fragments, a piece of Samsonite suitcase, remnants of a Toshiba radio cassette player, and the microscopic debris of a timing device were located. This evidence pointed towards the growing idea that the explosion was an act of terror. Along with the bomb, fragments of clothing were found which were bought from Mary's House in Malta. As the investigation continued, the trail of evidence pointed at Libya, a nation under the rule of Muammar Gaddafi. Intelligence agencies had long suspected Libya of harboring and supporting radical terrorist groups. In 1991, after years of searching, two Libyan nationals, Abdelbasset al-Megrahi and Lamine Khalifa Fima, were charged with orchestrating the bombing. Years of dispute followed, but ended with their extradition to the Netherlands and trial in 1999. This arrangement was part of a unique agreement where Scottish court would operate in the Netherlands to ensure a fair trial. The trial began in 2000s, capturing global attention as it unfolded. In 2001, after 2 years of the proceedings, the verdict was delivered. With help from eyewitness Tony Gauci and other evidence, al-Megrahi was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, while Fimel was not charged. However, the verdict did little to answer the lingering questions, and Megrahi's conviction remained shrouded in controversy, with many questioning the absence of a clear motive. The verdict marked a significant moment in the long quest for justice through the debates about the case's handling, and the evidence presented continue to this day. The bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 tore a hole in international security industry. It exposed various vulnerabilities in air travel practices, prompting a global overhaul of security protocols and baggage screening procedures. But the most profound impact was felt by the families of the victims. From 21 different nations, they lost loved ones, parents, children, spouses, and friends. Their lives were shattered in an instant, leaving a void that no amount of justice could truly fill. Memorials were constructed in Lockerbie, Arlington National Cemetery, and Syracuse University, where 35 students perished, a chilling reminder of the tragedy's far-reaching impact. These monuments stand not only as testaments to the victims, but as calls for peace and accountability. Each year, commemorative services are held at these sites, drawing survivors, families, and supporters from around the world to honor those lost. These memorials also serve as educational sites where future generations learn about the consequences of terrorism and the importance of global cooperation in preventing such atrocities. They symbolize a collective vow to remember the past and strive for a more secure and just world. In 2003, Libya finally accepted responsibility for the bombing, but this did little to erase the years of denial and grieving. Compensation was offered, yet the true cost of the tragedy remained unrepairable. The acknowledgement was part of a broader effort by Libya to reintegrate into the international community and lift the sanctions that had long crippled its economy. Despite the financial reparations, many of the victims' family continued to seek deeper justice and full disclosure of the events leading up to the bombing. The incident left an indelible mark on international relations and highlighted the enduring need for vigilance in combating terrorism. Libya's admission, while a step towards closure, could never fully heal the profound loss experienced by the families of the 270 victims. So what would you say were the reasons behind the attack on Pan Am Flight 103?
Well, it can be linked to multiple factors, but personally, I believe that it was a revenge bombing for a previous attack on Libya. 2 years before the bombing, on April 5th, 1986, 3 people were killed and 229 were injured when La Belle de Paquet was bombed in West Berlin. This club was frequently visited by American soldiers and was eventually linked to Libya, conducted by the Libyan Intelligence Service.
Well, why would they attack the plane?
Well, that's a great question. After the club bombing, the United States rigorously bombed Libyan cities in Tripoli and Benghazi. This could have motivated a retaliation in the bombing of Pan Am 103.